Welcome everyone to Africa Fire Mission's weekly virtual trainings here on Zoom. Our volunteers are happy to provide this training to you, and you are encouraged to share what you learn with your colleagues. And as you know, this training is provided free of charge, does not include a certificate of attendance. The trainings will be recorded. When possible, recordings will be available on AFM's YouTube channel for future viewing. Since this is a 1-hour training, we encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat, to say hi there, ask any questions, and stay connected that way. Please be sure to mute your microphones. If you have any questions, also feel free to unmute yourself though for those. And Jose is going to get us started with some words of encouragement this morning.
Thank you, Nancy. Truly appreciate. Welcome so much, Mr. Howard Cohen. And today we're looking forward for the lesson that you prepared for us. Well, today at about 5, when the lesson is over, we shall not be having our tea time because I'll be on the road. So I'll not have time to connect with us guys. However, that said, I have a word of encouragement, and what today was coming through my head or through my mind, and it has been going through the last 2 weeks, is that what would you do if you are not afraid? What would you do if you are not afraid? For example, as a firefighter, what will you be able to accomplish with what you know currently? If you decided to tell yourself to go to the next level in terms of learning new skill, what do you think you'll be able to accomplish? Are you comfortable being in your comfort zone? Yeah. So today or these last 2 weeks, I've been learning not to be on my comfort zone. It's really, really worked up on me. And I can tell you for sure that whatever is on the other side of your comfort zone is freedom, is so much new frontiers in regards to knowledge, and also what we're being taught with our trainers. Yeah, what Mr. Howard Cohen taught us in the last time lesson. Are you using that? What he's taught us to learn about hoses? Yeah. What are you learning? Are you going back to the lessons that we've been posting on YouTube? All this is important, yeah? In terms of you realizing that not being afraid to go to the next level. So my prayer for me to you is that you don't get afraid, you go to your new frontiers, and you stop being comfortable in your comfort zone. All right? So I'll say a short prayer and I'll hand it over to Mr. Howard. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we give you thanks. Thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity of learning. Thank you for the opportunity of giving us life, to give us the technology of Zoom so that we can be poured knowledge from different instructors, and today including Mr. Howard. Lord, we ask you that you give him more wisdom. You give him a good connection so that we can get what you have prepared for us. We thank you and we bless you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Back to you, sir. Mr. Howard, take us through the lesson, sir.
All right. First of all, before I start up my PowerPoint and I can see you, I just want to say hello and thank you again for having me back. This is a lesson I gave a while back. I hope that if you're back again and you're hearing it for the second time, I hope I'm consistent, and I hope that you still find it valuable. If this is your first time coming to this session, I want to thank you for giving up an hour of your day, of your life, to take a chance on learning from me. I'm not sure that I'm going to push you too much out of your comfort zone with today's lesson, because today's lesson in some ways is pretty fundamental and probably mostly a review for most of you. But in any case, I want to thank you, and I'll get started. Oh, before I do, I just want to let you all know that actually, in the spirit of what Jose offered, I did. I left my comfort zone last week, and I officially retired as a active volunteer firefighter. I know it sounds funny to talk about retiring from a volunteer position, but I considered it a professional position, one I wasn't really paid very much for, but I did get paid a little bit. And you know, I'm not putting on an air pack anymore, and I'm devoting my time to teaching and to training, and you know, the sorts of things you do when you're not being an active firefighter. You still got your whole hand in the pot, as it were. So let me now share my screen, and then we'll get started. If you do have questions along the way, or you wanna comment, um, you know, if I ask a question, you know, feel free to unmute and shout out your answer. So here we go. Now let's see if I do it right. Oh, I've got to start at the beginning. That helps. Okay, so before I get started too far, are you seeing a screen with two slides on it or with one slide? Can someone unmute and give me a shout?
There's one. You're good.
Just one slide. Okay, great. Okay, so I've already said my thank yous and welcome, so let's move on. I want to say a thank you, a broader thank you. You know, we all learn from everybody else. As they say, we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. So I want to give some shout outs to some firefighters who I have personally never met, although I did talk to two of them in over the phone and through email. But these are four firefighters who have had profound influence on my training and on my thinking as a firefighter and as a firefighter instructor. The first is to Mike Gagliano, who's in the Seattle Fire Department, an incredible speaker, presenter. I've learned a lot from him from his webinars, and he's really generous with his time. And I reached out to him via email, and we had some good conversations. Mike Ciampo, this guy, if you start doing search on YouTube for firefighters, you'll find Mike all over the place. He's got these great short lessons. I learned a ton from Mike too. I wish I could meet him in person someday. Bobby Halton, he's sort of the elder statesman here in the United States, editor of a great magazine called Fire Engineering. Highly recommend you look for it. You can get free online, you know, the online version. Great firefighter, great guy in terms of, you know, connecting people. And lastly, Chief Dobson, who has really sort of set the standard for a lot of us here. He was a New York Fire Department chief. And of course, I have to thank all the firefighters along the way who have taught me, trained me, put me in my place, saved me. And lastly, I want to thank the Africa Fire Mission for creating this opportunity for me as a teacher and a firefighter to connect with all of you, to share with you, to learn from you, and to make this great connection. So thank you, everybody. So this is a little bit about me, if you didn't know. That's me in the upper right-hand corner when I was a lieutenant. That my department lieutenants wear red badges. I'm standing on the roof of a building, and there was nothing going on, so we took some posing pictures just for fun. And that is snow I'm standing on. It was the middle of the winter. I am the department chaplain and continue to be doing that. But I wasn't the deputy chief from until just this recently. I'm the training officer for the department. This is my levels of training, other things. And so some other things about me you might find interesting. Professionally, I'm also a rabbi, which, if you're not familiar, is kind of the equivalent of a minister or a pastor in the Jewish world. And that's me in my religious garb there. And I have a side business as a life coach. And I used to have a business as a wilderness guide, leading canoe trips and building canoes. And that's what those other pictures on the other side are. So that's me, just a little bit of background on me. I have 3 grown kids, and Jose has invited me to bring them with me when I finally make my trip to Africa. So what I'm going to talk about today is fire dynamics. And it's a pretty fundamental course. And for those of you who are kind of new in the fire service, this is important to learn. And for those of you who've been around for a while, it's a good review. So you can, you know, we often, you know, as we move along, we kind of file things and forget them. So here's what we're going to talk about. Definition of fire. What is it? We're going to talk about heat transfer, why it's important. And one of the last two things are some of the most important elements that we need to pay attention to. The first is that we need to remember that and how that smoke is fuel. And I'm going to repeat that phrase, smoke is fuel, throughout, because it's a really, really important thing that we have to pay attention to, because when we don't, it puts us at great risk. And lastly, I'm going to talk about the way fire flows. And that's the basic, this is the basic course, but fire flow is the foundation of things like what we call here vent, entry, isolate. When you're looking for fires and search, and when you're looking for people inside burning buildings, fire flow helps us understand, what kind of risks we're facing. So these are fundamentals, but good to review and definitely necessary to learn first time around. So here's some definitions. Fire dynamics is the study of how chemistry, fire science, material science, and the mechanical engineering disciplines of fluid mechanics and heat transfer interact to influence fire behavior. That's a mouthful, and it boils down to this. Fire dynamics is the study of how fires start, spread, and develop. That's all the above. The fancy long definition means fire dynamics. How does it move? And how does it start? How do you stop it? How does it move? And so forth. So fire dynamics, it's fundamental to what we do. This is our enemy, so we really need to know our enemy. Well, there are three reasons to understand fire dynamics. One, to keep ourselves safe. Two, to save lives. And three, it's to save property. If you don't understand the dangers of fire, you won't know if or when you are in real danger. And that's a problem when your job is to fight fires, go into burning buildings, and rescue people and save property. Because if you don't understand the enemy you're fighting, the enemy will definitely have the upper hand. So, what exactly is fire? We have this thing here in the United States called the National Fire Protection Association. Shorthand, it's NFPA. It establishes hundreds of guidelines and for what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to do it, our equipment, all kinds of things. And their guidelines, we're not required to follow them, but we're strongly encouraged to do it. So the NFPA is sort of like our Bible here, a firefighter's Bible. In the NFPA, it says, this is what fire is: a rapid oxidation process, which is a chemical reaction, resulting in the evolution of light and heat in varying intensities. Light, of course, are the flames. Fire is an exothermic chemical reaction that emits heat and light. So exothermic means it's letting off, the heat. This chemical reaction is called pyrolysis, and it is the decomposition of a compound into one or more substances of heat alone. Now, I can guarantee you that the vast majority of firefighters in the United States know exactly what fire is, but couldn't give you this kind of definition. Learned it at one point, learned what pyrolysis was, but unless they're really into chemistry or complicated words, they learned it. Now they know what it is, but you don't hear people using it in their everyday conversations. But bottom line, it's a chemical reaction. But it's important to emphasize that fire involves a chemical reaction, and we'll see why more about that in a little bit. Okay, so this is just a little bit more reiterating. I said before, pyrolysis is the chemical decomposition. So with the emphasis on chemical decomposition, the byproduct of this decomposition is smoke, charred wood, fire, release of chemicals like hydrogen cyanide, carbon monoxide, various dioxins, furans, and formaldehyde, and all the other chemicals that make us sick in fire grounds. So there are four ingredients that are required to make fire. I'm going to take a chance here and ask you people to unmute and yell out what those four ingredients are required to make fire, and we'll see what we come up with. Anybody want to yell out something? All right, bashful group. Oh, here comes someone.
Oh, here we go.
I couldn't make out what you said.
Give it a try.
Combustible materials.
All right, you need fuel. Okay, good.
Oxygen.
O2, oxygen, good. Fuel, got it. Oxygen.
Heat.
Heat,
Yes, heat.
got it. One more. I'll give you a hint on this one. I emphasized the word in the chemical, in the pyrolysis definition. It's a chemical reaction. You all have seen this thing called the tetrahedron. It shows you got to have heat, fuel, oxygen, but you also have to have a chemical chain reaction. And fortunately for us as firefighters, our main tool for fighting fire is water, and water works against all four of these elements. So this is what it takes to have fire. Take away any one of these and you can put out the fire. Okay, let's talk about heat transfer and why it concerns us. So the chemistry of heat is that as something gets warmer, the molecules start to move faster. The faster they move, the more heat they generate. And as they generate more heat, they warm up whatever's next to it. And so that transfer, that warming up of the energy in one element or one object transfers it to another object. And the way heat works is that it always transfers from the hotter element to the cooler element. It's just, that's because of the molecules that are bouncing around in whatever the product is. So the heat transfer is the major factor in the ignition, growth, spread, and decay and extinction of a fire. So if you have a fire and there's nothing for the heat to transfer to additionally catch fire, the fire will eventually die out. So you have that transfer is critical to the spread of fire. This is sort of one of these like basic things that we all know from just life experience, but it's worth reiterating. Heat is always transferred from the hotter object to the cooler object. Heat energy transfers to an object and increases the object's temperature, and therefore the heat energy is transferred and it gets hotter and hotter. So it's a basic chemical reaction. But here's what's really important to remember. And in a fire environment, you are always the coolest object. So you walk into that burning building, you're gonna get hotter because the heat is being transferred to you. And no matter how good your gear is, you're still gonna get hot if that fire is a lot hotter than you. So let's talk about mechanisms of heat transfer. In other words, how the heat moves from object A to object B. There's three ways that this happens. The first is called conduction. by the way, when I say first, these are not in order of priority. This is just the way I put them on my program. Heat transfer within solids or between contacting solids. So it moves, you grab a hot cup, the hot cup transfers the heat from your hand, from the cup to your hand. That's conduction. Convection is the heat transferred by movement of liquids or gases. So you're heating up water on a stove, and it's getting hotter and boiling, and steam is coming out. So that heat is now being transferred in the form of a gas. That's convection. And third is radiation. Fancy way of describing it, it's the transfer of electromagnetic waves, but you know it as, I'm standing too close to the fire, I can feel the heat, it's getting me. Or you're out in the sun and the heat from the sun is making you hotter and hotter. That's radiation. So these are the three ways that heat transfers within a burning structure or building and affects us. Like I said before, and I won't apologize for repeating myself, because there are just some basic lessons that we just have to keep repeating. Heat always transfers from hot objects to cooler objects. In the fire environment, you are the cooler object. Got a repetition of the repeat of the same slide, but reinforcing these components with a different colored screen for you. So here's a visual of how conduction works. Here's a firefighter crawling on his hands and knees towards the fire. And everywhere where there's a point of contact, hands, knees, toes, heat is being transferred. I don't know if you guys do this. We have a drill here that we do where we get into a burn, we call it a burn trailer. It's basically like a big truck, back of a big truck, and a big fire is built in one end behind a wall, causing the fire to flow and the heat to flow, and it gets really hot to give people the experience of what it's like to be in a really hot building. And they always tell us when we're in there, don't touch the person next to you clothing, because when you do that, you're gonna reduce the insulation and make the transfer where like the contact points are, makes the heat transfer. So where the knees and the toes and the hands are pressing down, it's compressing the insulation, and the heat transfer then between the solids, the heat on the ground to your body speeds up. So convection is the gases. This is the reason. So the cooler air is coming in from down below. We'll talk a little bit about why that always is the case a little later on. The cooler air is coming down below, and the hot air is rising, because that's what hot air and smoke does. And all those gases are going out. So the hot air here, the convection danger here is if you walk into this building, we all know from all our training and our experiences, life experiences and firefighting experiences, that heat's always on the top of the ceiling. And in fires, that's the heat, as the heat and the smoke lowers, we have to get down on our hands and knees. That's where the cooler air is. So if we're up in the top air, where all that hot smoke is blowing over us, we're in this convection heat, and it's just transferring from the air to us. Radiation is straightforward. The chair is burning. There's all kinds of heat coming off. You're crawling towards it. The closer you get towards it, the hotter that part of your body is going to get. So obviously, this guy crawling, his hands, his face, his helmet, that's all going to be a lot hotter than his backside. And just a reminder, the sun is heating us with radiation. Okay, now, having talked about the way heat transfers and the way fire, how it moves in the building, let's talk about this flow path issue here. So flow path is where the air is going, how it moves through the building. Hot air rises because when you heat air, or any other gas for that matter, it's going to expand. When the air expands, it becomes less dense than the air around it. The less dense air then floats in the more dense cold air, like water floats on water because wood is less dense than water. So the flow path is the volume between an inlet and an outlet that allows the movement of heat and smoke from the high pressure within the fire area toward the lower areas accessible via doors, windows, and the openings. In other words, the flow path is where this hot air is moving. And it's between the, wherever the air is coming in and going out, that's the flow path. The closer to the outlet, the hotter and more dangerous the air, the heat, and the smoke. So, point of physics, high pressure always moves towards low pressure. So, you have a tea kettle, you heat it up, the pressure builds, it's got to get, it needs to go to low pressure area. The low pressure area is out the end of the tea kettle. Airflow movement of air, the airflow is the movement of air. It always goes from high pressure to low pressure. So you look at you're in a building. Well, let me go back to this. You're in a building and the fire's inside and you see just puffs of air coming out through the windows. What does that tell you? Well, it tells you there's a lot of pressure inside there, and that smoke, that heat is trying to get out, but it's not finding much of a place to do that. So it's pushing as much as it can, forcing itself out through the cracks wherever they are. Just the way that the high pressure of air inside the tea kettle forces itself out through the top and then causes the whistling. So the high pressure airflow is always from the high end to the low end, from the heat end towards the cool end. Just another graphic of it. These are the way ventilation flow paths work. You have cool air coming in and the hot air gases go out. Now, this is, how our fireplaces work, right? Our stoves. We have a stove pipe for the heat to go out, and we've got holes in the bottom for the cool air to come in. And all of that does is, that's how it works. It works the same way in a burning building. We had a fire a few weeks ago where it started on the ground floor, and between the first floor and the second floor, there was a vent. In some of our older buildings, they put these vents in the floor in order to allow heat from the ground floor to get up to the second floor. So what happened as the fire built up, it went right up through the floor and that floor vent to the second floor room and caused a lot of damage up there because just followed this pattern. The cool air and the hot air all rising right up. So when the airflow is going to go one of two ways, or has one of two ways to move through. We refer to these as unidirectional and bidirectional. So unidirectional means it goes in one way and it goes out the other, as you can see from the top picture. Cool air comes in from the bottom. The hot smokes go out from the top. In the bidirectional flow, they're going in and out of the same way. So the cool air comes in through this door, but then the hot air goes out the same door at the top. So clearly, this is one of the reasons why we want to control doors, so we can control this flow of cool air and the movement of the hot air out. But it's also why, of course, again, we always go in low and get down on our hands and knees. So once we've opened the door to go in, we've created this airflow path, and it's going to go right up and out, unless, of course, there's a window on the other side. By the way, I'm not going to get into it in this presentation in detail, but I do want to point out that depending on where it's called the neutral plane. I don't know if you were where the green line is between the cooler and the hot air. It's known as the neutral plane. And depending on where that neutral plane is in the doorway or the open space, can tell us whether the fire is in the basement or the fire is on a second floor, or the seat of the fire is in the basement of the second floor. So it's very important to begin to recognize that the relevance of that. So I want to now say, if you take nothing away from today, I want you to remember this. If you haven't ever learned this, I'm gonna make it really clear. But smoke is fuel. So all this stuff that's coming out the top here, that's fuel. What that means is that if it gets hot enough, it could ignite. So what is fuel? And what is smoke? It's fuel. It's energy. What is energy? It's potential heat. What is potential heat? It's fire. So if you see smoke, that smoke could turn into fire if the conditions are right. All right, I want to play a video for you. Okay. Oh, got it. Let's see. Here we go.
A good incident action plan involves an understanding of where the fire is located and where it is spreading. Fire gases and heat will move from an area of higher pressure, typically where the fire is, to an area of lower pressure. This path of smoke and heat spread is known as the exhaust portion of the flow path. In a structure fire, a flow path exists between the fire and an area of high pressure and any adjacent room, hall, stairway, open door, or window that connects to an area of lower pressure. During fire suppression, firefighters have the opportunity to take advantage of how water streams can alter this flow of smoke and heat. In some instances, it is advantageous to alter the flow. For example, during an interior attack when there is a vent opposite the advancing hose crew. Entraining as much air as possible with the hose stream creates pressure that can push the products of combustion ahead of the advancing crew. In other instances, for example, during an exterior water application, it can be more effective to cool and knock back the fire using streams and nozzle handling techniques that limit air entrainment and pressure buildup. This limits the impact on the flow.
I want to pause this for a second and back up a little bit. And now, do you see the fire in that smoke? That's just not fire coming out from inside the building. That's the smoke burning.
Using streams and nozzle handling techniques that limit air entrainment and pressure buildup. This limits the impact on the flow path and allows the exterior vent to continue to function as an exhaust vent. Flow path and fire suppression must be thought of together. Knowing how and when to alter the flow path makes for a more effective and safer fire attack.
So the last words that the presenter made when he said that you have to understand the flow path and coordinate your flow path, your knowledge of the flow path of the fire with your extinguishing, with your water application. So that's just another example of why understanding flow path is important. So here's a couple of more examples of our videos of making the case that smoke is fuel. So, sorry, let me, I don't know why it's not letting me play. Oh, try this one. Oh, I don't know why my videos are not playing. Must have a bad link. Sorry about that. Those links do break. You can do this experiment yourself. You see in the picture on the right, there's a candle, first with a mat. So light your candle and then blow out the candle and quickly take your match and hold it up to the little plume of smoke, and you'll watch it will relight your candle. It's a really good, simple exercise to do to show to highlight the point that smoke is fuel. Let me see if I can get this last video. Let me escape here, go out of here for a second. See if I can get it to play here. I must have a bad link, must have broken. Oh, not gonna happen. Okay. Let's see. Now I think I have that technical glitch here of a, let's try this. All right, my keynote froze, my program froze. Let me reload it. Apologies. The perils of technology.
While he's loading, does anyone have any questions or comments?
I have to say, I do an awful lot of stuff on Zoom and using PowerPoint, and this is the first time I had something like this. It freeze on me.
Happens
It's
to
coming
all of
back.
us.
What's that?
Happens to all of us.
I know, it's just, what are you gonna do? So it's all right, we're back to this screen. Let's see what happens. It should play. It's giving me the so you get, so you know, you understand what's going on here. This is the basics of what we do with our firefighting. Understanding fire. Oh boy, now the sun is shining in on me hard. Let's see if I can just play the last few slides. I need to share my screen again. Okay, so let's wrap up. So let me just, I'm going to repeat myself now and the high points, that the takeaways for you. I want you to remember the heat is always transferred from the hotter object to the cooler object, and you are that cooler object most of the time in fires. There are two basic kind of flow paths, the bidirectional and the unidirectional. It's important for us to understand that, because it's telling us where the fire is moving, where our dangerous areas are. If you have a flow path that's bidirectional, then you could be, you could, if by your actions in one end of the burning building could cause the fire to move to another part, to another place. There's been some dramatic cases where a fire starts in an apartment in one end of a long hallway, but because the windows and doors in an apartment at the other end of the hallway are open, the fire just spreads right through the hall and then out the other side. So it's important to understand those, the flow of the fire. It's also good to remember that airflow is always from high pressure to low pressure. That's kind of important too when you're looking at a big building. If you see a big, a big shopping like mall or a warehouse, and you see smoke coming out of vents or the doors or windows, you know that there's a lot of smoke and a lot of pressure inside there in order to build up enough to force its way out. So, understanding that the airflow is always from the high pressure to low pressure can help tell you something about a building as you approach it. Please remember, smoke is fuel. When you see smoke, black, ugly smoke coming out of a building, that smoke can turn into flames in an instance if the right mixes of the ingredients of heat and oxygen and fuel, or they're all in the chemical reaction are there. So that smoke is fuel. If you put water on that fuel, you're going to make it harder to ignite. Once again, I have on here for you to drive home the point that smoke is fuel. And basically, fuel is stored energy, right? And the chemical process and the releases that heat energy, that stored energy, in the form of heat and fire. Water absorbs the energy and heat, and that is what leads to suppression of the fire. So what we need to do when we see fire is we need to keep all these things in the back of our mind, and we need to put water on it to absorb the heat. We need to control the door to keep the air, the oxygen out. And lastly, if you're gonna vent, you have to make sure you have water ready, because without the water, all you're doing is giving the energy, the fuel and fire, oxygen to grow. So I'm going to wrap up here with a final thought from a state trooper who's retired that I think is really important for us all to keep in mind. And then I will be happy to answer questions or hear any comments, thoughts that you all have. And his comment is this: we don't rise to the occasion, we fall back on our training. This, in a way, goes back to what Jose said in the beginning about, pushing ourselves beyond our level of comfortability. And we do that through our training. Make yourself uncomfortable, in your training and your learning, because when things go bad, when you're in a crisis situation, you're going to fall back on that training. And if you don't have the training within you already, what are you going to fall back on? So I really like Kurt Wagenbach's comment: we don't rise to the occasion, we fall back on our training. And with that, there's some links for more information if you want them. I can make this available through Nancy and through Jose. If you want to go, you can get to these sites. I don't know how accessible these kinds of websites are for you, but I can certainly make it available to you. And that that's it for me today in terms of what I have to present. And I apologize again for the technology glitch. It's one of those mysterious things. I don't know why it worked fine yesterday, but this morning it decided not to. I'll be happy to answer any questions if I can, or if you'd like to share any comments. I see there's some chats. I don't know if there are questions. Oh, just people introducing themselves. Okay. So
Yeah, I'll just give them a moment here. Anyone have any questions that you'd like to ask? The floor is open.
yeah, I realize this is pretty fundamental stuff, and but good for reviewing.
Samuel, go ahead.
I just wanted Mr. Cohen to explain further on the ingredients fire as far as chemical reaction is concerned. Because as far as I know the ingredients of fire, there are only three: fuel, oxygen, and heat. Now, the chemical reaction, how is it that it is an ingredient?
Right. Great question, Samuel. You've clearly been in the fire service for a while. And I say that because, at least here in the United States, we used to teach this as the fire pyramid, the three ingredients as you identified. And the fire science thinking was that there is this process that happens. It's not just that you have the oxygen or the fuel or the heat, but something is happening in a chemical process. And if you can interrupt the chemical process, then you also stop the fire. And so that's why they added it in. Let me think if I could come up with an example. So, there are certain metals that will burn underwater. So they continue to burn underwater, or if you're pouring water on them, because water doesn't extinguish, they don't lose their oxygen, and they have so much fuel that the fuel and that's within it, because of the makeup of the product, the fuel and the heat create a chemical process, and the chemical process continues to generate more and more heat. And so if you can interrupt the chemical process, and I'm not a chemist, or I'm not schooled enough in fire science to tell you how you can interrupt the chemical process in a situation like that, you can suppress the fire. So, but the fire science, pros, as it were, said we really need to think of it as four things happening. That you have the three that we know about: the fuel, the oxygen, and the heat. But it's the fact that they combine, they create a chemical process, which we've always known about because pyrolysis has always been around. But so now that we know about it, now realize that's a chemical process that's part of what keeps all the fire going, just the same as the fuel.
Everyone for attending. Here in just a moment, I will post a evaluation link for you, and we would love for you to take a moment to fill that out. If you are not a part, I think most of you are, but if you're not a part of our networking group, I really want to encourage you to join our networking group and follow along. We actually have started posting a monthly blog on our networking group, and it's a great place to learn some additional information in addition to the trainings, as well as have discussions with fellow firefighters from across Africa. So thank you, Howard. Next week, we will have Richard back to complete his training on, oh, there's Richard. Hi, Richard. I hope I'm speaking correctly, that you'll be back next week to talk to us and finish the training on hose operations. So we're excited to have you back. Please invite others to register for the training, to join us. And always remember, a better fire service starts with you.